sizes. And now what I do prior to that is I just give them a wash. So I'll do this one here. Just give them a wash before you start off with. And then we're going to dry it. Just like it nice and dry. Now with this recipe, you can leave the skin on. However, I find that it gets a bit tough. So you've got to peel them first. So do that. It's the old school peeler. I'll get another peeler. This one's a bit blunt. I don't know if anyone's got one of these peelers. I love them and I rate them. And every time a friend of mine gave it to me, and every time I use it, it reminds me of her. So actually, as a gift, I think it's a great one to give to people. I'm just peeling this. And also I find the skin can be a little bit bitter if you leave it on as well. So the first process is, to peel it. Now, eggplants actually...
Sorry, mate. We've got a couple of questions here. I've got a question here from Jane. Is this technique that you're using in this example, can this be applied to other vegetables?
It sure can. I do the same recipe with green tomatoes, which I've got here and I've picked here. This is a great one as well to use for green tomatoes, particularly at the end of the season when, not so much up here, because for everyone, let you know that I live in northern New South Wales. I moved up here. Originally, I was in Melbourne. So a lot of my growing experience has been in Victoria. And as I was saying to Daryl earlier, I'm struggling a little bit to get my timing right, because one of the things, having grown up and growing and getting an understanding of the seasons, has all been about timing and when you plant things. And I'm having to learn that all again, because the climate and the environment's different. One of the things I don't typically get a lot of up here is green tomatoes. If I were to leave them on the vine, they tend to ripen up pretty quickly here. However, I do have to pick them often here when they're green because we have issues with fruit fly. But in Victoria, when it particularly gets to the colder months, so from now onwards, as it starts to cool down, you will find that your tomatoes won't ripen up. So I use this recipe to actually preserve all my green tomatoes. It's really tasty and it makes a great sort of little addition to things like fried eggs. The other thing, if you're finding that your tomatoes are not ripening for some reason when you get into the end of the season, one of the ways you can do that is actually pick them green as well. And you can put them on the windowsill and in the sunlight and they will start to ripen. And another way to also ripen your tomatoes, if they're not ripening on the actual vine, is to go along around the base of the roots in the plant, actually grab a knife and cut the root zone. And that actually then starts to ripen the tomatoes because the plant gets stressed and it then starts to ripen those tomatoes. So yes, you can do other vegetables with this recipe in answer to the question.
Thanks, Fab. And there's a question here from Dee who asks, with respect to finger eggplants, would you also, peel the skin, or do you think they'd be fine just sliced?
In regards to what? Say that again, sorry.
A finger eggplants?
You can. Again, I find them tough. I did some. So this is essentially what we're going to be making. I'll just show you there. These guys here, they're just, I did these last week and they were my Lebanese style eggplants. So they're longer, thinner. I left the skin on. I found them a bit tough. That's the only thing. I find them a bit chewy. They don't get soft the longer they spend in the jar. So I would try and peel them as well. That's just a preference thing though. So the next thing I do is actually just to start slice it. You can do it in slithers like that if you wanted, okay? But I like to do it in strips. So I'll show what I mean. You can tell I'm definitely not a chef with my knife skills.
I don't know about that, Fab. What does everyone online think about Fab's knife skills? Can we get a bit of commentary there? I personally think he's doing a pretty excellent job.
That's because we don't want to be rushed to hospital because I cut myself. Mind you, I've got quite a few chef mates and they all cut their fingers. So,
hold on. Amanda says not great, mate. But Wendy says looking sharp. So it's somewhere between the two.
All right, so all I'm doing is I'm just creating like these little, you can see that, these sort of fingers, just like so. So I'll do the whole eggplant. Now, did I mention where eggplant come from? I don't think I did. No,
you
they
didn't.
actually originate from India or China. They're not exactly sure. And how they got the name eggplant was, I think, it's all presumed, but you got the little white ones, and people thought they looked like eggs, hence the name eggplant. But eggplants are actually part of what they call the Solanaceae family, which is the nightshade, which is the same family as your tomatoes, potatoes, etc. And with these potatoes, actually, this one, not potatoes, eggplants, for example, I actually grew these on a grafted wild tobacco plant that I've got in the back garden. My dad and his cousin came up from Victoria to visit, and they stopped on the side of the road and they picked a wild tobacco plant and gave it to me. And I've ended up grafting a couple eggplants to it. And the whole idea behind that is that it almost becomes like a perennial plant rather than being grown as an annual, because typically if you grow them like this, they get grown as annuals. But if you graft them onto the base of the wild tobacco, it ends up becoming more like a perennial, and it should last anywhere between 6 and 7 years. So that's the idea behind that. I'll just put that to the side. So now I've just sort of quickly put them into a bowl. So this recipe actually is going to take about 3 days to do, believe it or not. Not today, because we don't have 3 days, but you want to do it over a period of 3 days. So the first day you just do this. And what you then do is you've got to salt it. So you're liberal with some salt. I use a good quality, we've just got some Himalayan salt, but any good quality salt. Just want to give it a really good coating. And what this does is it draws out all the
And
moisture.
Fablo,
Say that again.
we've just got a comment here from Judith, who says she's very happy to report that your latest book is available at her local library. Mike,
Yes.
whereabouts are you based, Judith? That would be good to know. We've got a question here, Fab, from Jane, who is just querying whether perhaps these recipes might be available, where she could find those.
This recipe is actually in my book, mention that. This
Okay.
one itself's in the book. And I do the green tomato one as well on my Insta feed as well. So it's pretty simple, easy to do. So I've just given that a really good coating of salt. And the whole idea of salting, okay, the whole idea of introducing salt when you're preserving is that it draws the moisture out of the actual vegetable and out of the cells. And the whole idea of that is that the moisture is where the bacteria can grow. So by salting it, it helps to preserve it. So what we then do, we put salt. I need to weigh that down. So I grab a plate. Ideally, I wouldn't do it in this stainless steel bowl. The bowls that I've got and I'm using in some that I've already got going. But what I do is I place a plate over the top, and then I want to weigh it down. I'm just going to use a pestle and mortar that I've got here. You could use a pot with some water, and then you just sort of sit that there. I then cover it with a tea towel. That one here. And the whole idea of doing that is just to keep the flies off it. All right, and then you put that to the side for, I reckon, probably overnight, 24 hours. And what will happen, I got one earlier. This one here. This one here, I've weighted down with a pot. You can sort of see here. What happens is that draws all the moisture out. Here I've done it, you could do it in a bowl, but I've done it in an actual colander. And you can sort of see, bear with me. See that? All of that moisture's come out of the actual eggplant. Now that's all the bitterness as well. So it removes all the bitter eggplant. Just tip that out. Then you get, so this has been overnight, 24 hours. what I then do is then I'll try and squeeze out as much moisture as possible, which I just will do. Another one here.
And Fab, question here from Jane. Would you salt any other vegetables you might use besides eggplant?
Yeah, definitely. I like them. The exact same method as I mentioned before can do with any sort of green, fleshy vegetables. You can do it with tomatoes. You could do it with cucumbers and that sort of thing. But I find green tomatoes work really well. It's just those two typically that you do in a Sicilian culture and the way that you would preserve them. Like I mentioned before, the whole idea of the salt is to help preserve it because it takes all the moisture out. Now this one here, so I've basically that is the same. So that's the next day. What I've done is I've added a good quality vinegar and I've soaked it in vinegar. I tend to use an apple cider vinegar or a white wine vinegar. I find that that's just a nicer taste flavor. You could use white vinegar, but it tends to be a bit more tart. So I like the apple cider vinegar. And then once I've done that, so that's been sitting again for another 24 hours. So this is day 2. I've then got to drain that. So bear with me. Oh. As I was explaining to Daryl before, I've just been running around today and I came home and my son, which is fantastic, he likes to cook, which is great, but he doesn't like to clean. So if stuff gets put away where I can't find it. So I'm just going to drain as much as I can that vinegar out. You can see this fine, by the way, Daryl.
We can see you loud and clear. Thanks,
Good.
Fab. Yep.
Good. It's just hard to tell because I'm actually streaming through my phone and I can't see my phone. So
yeah. And for everyone online, Fab and I were just talking a moment or two before you all joined us today, and he was saying Fab runs a lot of IRL sort of in-person workshops, and I guess when you're in person, you get a lot of energy off the audience and the vibe and what have you. So it's quite tricky in this sort of context. So
it's very different. It's very different because you don't have a conversation and you're not always, it's a bit bizarre because there's no one else in the room, but I'm enjoying it. It's good fun. And as you mentioned, I do a lot of workshops. I do workshops up at Harvest here, just outside of Byron, where I run both adult workshops and kids workshops on how to grow food at home. So predominantly as what I do for a business is I do a bit of gardening. So I'm a gardener, so I have to mow lawns and all that sort of stuff. But I also do a lot of consulting with people, teaching them and giving them advice on what it is that they can actually do in their own back garden. As well as I make a lot of content for Instagram and YouTube, and I love to cook. So when I'm at home, I do a fair bit of cooking. So anyway, the next step, all right, I've just soaked that in vinegar. The next step is to actually bottle it, all right? Now, I put them in jars. I collect all my jars. I tend to buy, it's funny, I buy produce now, products, because of the jars that they actually come in. Nothing else, and not necessarily because of the product, because I'm going to reuse those jars. I find that there's certain brands that peel better, you know, so I use these.
I can totally relate to that. I just had to chime in. My kids have our surname is Nichols, and they have a pocket money project called Nichols Pickles. Yeah. And they sell their pickles to all the neighbours around the block, and it's the same for us. It's all about when you go to the supermarkets, they're all about the jars.
Oh, it is. I actually bought something yesterday just because I like the jar it came in. I'll show you because I can't help myself. There's just some pasta sauce, sugar, because I like that jar, you know? It's funny that. So the next step, all right, I've drained the vinegar out. I'm going to put it in the jar, but first I want to mix some spices through. So a couple things that I like to use a lot of, which gives it that sense of authenticity to the recipe, is fennel seeds, okay? So fennel seeds are used a lot in Southern Italian dishes. And the other thing is I grow a lot of fennel, and I don't grow it necessarily I don't grow it for the fennel bulbs themselves. I grow it for the seeds because I use the seeds as a herb and a spice. So a little trick with that too. So these are some fennel seeds. I'll show you these. These are some fennel seeds that I collected from my own garden. All right. Now, to divide them, all I do is I chuck them in a colander, and it's a great little hack. I put them in a colander and they all drop to the bottom and they go into the actual bowl, and then all the stalks are left at the top. So that's a little hack for you. But yeah, I just harvested these fennel seeds the other day. What did I do with them? Bear with me. They're just here in front of me. So I put some fennel seeds in there with them. I also like to use oregano. And the reason I like to use oregano, one, it tastes good, but oregano also has some natural antibacterial, whatever you call them, characters to it. So therefore they're great for also to put in preserves because it helps to stop the bacteria. I'll just mix that in.
Fab, we've got a couple of questions here,
Yep.
just while you're grabbing some stuff. We've got a bit of interest in your YouTube channel. Can you just let everyone know where they can subscribe?
Just go to YouTube and type in The Hungry Gardener in YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, whatever it might be. If you type in Hungry Gardener, I should come up. There's not too many of us, you know, so I think I am the only Hungry Gardener.
Awesome. I'll pop that into the chat.
Which actually came about, I got given the name by my book publisher, believe it or not. And that's how I got that name.
And whilst you're doing those bits there, can you just give everyone the super in brief story behind growing food the Italian way and how you moved back to the motherland? And
oh yeah, so back in it's now 2000 and when was it? We went 2016, and we'd gone. Well, basically, I used to have a business called the Little Veggie Patch Company in Victoria that I started with my friend Matt, and my wife had gotten unwell, so I decided at that stage that I was going to sell my share of the business and we were going to go overseas because life's too short. And we were going to packed up and literally went and moved to a town called Lucca in sort of like the southwest of Tuscany near Pisa. And we'd never been there before. I literally just rocked up with some suitcases, deciding that we're going to live there for 12 months. And it was probably the best decision I'd ever made in my life. Loved it. And if you've been to Lucca, you'll understand. It's probably the world's most livable city. So that book came about that, actually. The book is based around the 12 months of living there and a bit of a backstory about that, as well as just general gardening stuff. So, all right, I've given that a good mix. You could also add garlic in at this point. Just slice up some fine raw garlic. You could add it. I don't do that because I can't eat garlic anymore, but that's potentially what you could do at this stage. And then I just grab some jars. Now you can sterilize the jars. So I just chuck them in, and these I've pre-done already, but these are just in some hot water. So boil some water and put them in there for a while. You could also do them in the oven if you wanted to. So I just do that, and then you just basically place it in to a jar. So you pack it in like so. Bear with me.
Fab, we've got some questions here. If you know off the top of your head, what are some of your favorite jars you love to buy? Or what do you look for in a jar?
In a jar, size really. I love peanut butter. I eat a lot of peanut butter. Our whole family does, but it also because it's a great size jar, because I don't want my jars too big, because as soon as you open them, you've got to then put them in the freezer, the fridge. So I tend to like having smaller jars because I don't need to store them in the fridge so much, because these will keep pretty much indefinitely under oil. So therefore I like a smaller size jar, not too small, but big enough so you can fit enough in there, but not too big. So the other thing is, if they're a reasonable size jar, you can give them, these make great gifts, all right? Preserves make great gifts. One of the things I do as well a lot of is these chilies, for example. I do chili oil really simply and easily, which I've also got the recipe on Instagram on how to do that. I don't eat chili anymore, but I use it to give away as gifts because it's a great, easy one. So anyway, I've packed that in there, and then all I need to do is just use a good quality. I like to use an extra virgin olive oil. I find I like the richness of the flavor. You could go a lighter oil. You could also use vegetable oil, but I'm not a huge fan of vegetable oil. I prefer olive oil wherever preferable. And I just do that. And then you let it sit there and just grab a knife. Because what I want to do is get out all the air bubbles out of that jar. So before I'd seal it, anyway, what I would do is I just let it sit there for probably half an hour. Then I go back and I top it up with olive oil. And I want to make sure that all of the contents within is actually covered by that oil, because it actually acts as a seal and that no air gets in there. And then that can be stored in a nice cold, dark, place within the pantry. And like I said, that will probably last indefinitely if kept there. But it doesn't last that long in our house, it gets eaten. So that's pretty much it. And now I leave that, typically I would leave that a couple months, because it actually, by just sitting there, and particularly as well, if you add garlic to that, it takes on all those flavors. So the longer it sits there, the more flavorsome it becomes. So that's pretty much it. It's really simple. Great, again, to use on like paninis. I love making paninis with mortadella, some ricotta, and then I put a little bit of this pickled eggplant on top, and it's just divine. Or just even fried eggs. Just fry up some eggs and put a couple, a small bit of pickled eggplant on top, and it makes a great condiment. So that's a very traditional Southern Italian preserve, that one there. So easy to do, and now's the perfect time to do that. So that's the first one. All right. We all got that?
What did everyone think of that? Is that helpful, beneficial? Any thoughts on Fab's presentation? I'm thinking very much Jamie Oliver. No issues there. Slip right in. Yeah, got some comments here. That actually looks very easy. Great. Thanks, Fab. Awesome. Fantastic. So inspired. Nice, easy recipe. Can imagine doing it. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, you're going off, mate.
Everything I do is easy. All right. It's not hard. There's a reason I do it. I'm not that complicated. I don't believe in doing things that are complicated and going to take you a long time either. That's the beauty of a lot of these things that I've been taught as well, is that they're really simple and they're not time consuming. So
Fab, there's one final comment I've got to share here, and I probably need to capture this to share later too. But there's a comment here from Philip, who says, more like that Paul West fella, only better looking.
Please tell him that. Please tell him that.
I'll pass that.
I reckon I do look better in a wetsuit too. Where is he anyway? He's out surfing probably today, right?
He's actually down at the Apollo Bay Seafood Festival. Yeah.
Apollo Bay is very near a surf coast, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Yeah. All right. So that's the first one, the eggplant. You can do that really easily, but like I said, you can also do that with green tomatoes. So now's the time to do it. And yeah, it's really simple and it's tasty. The next one I'm going to do and talk about is carrots. Okay. Because I've been growing carrots, and I will mention today I pulled out some of the carrots, and I noticed this morning that I've got nematodes, which I don't know if anyone else has experienced that. Basically what that is like a little worm thing that grows and breeds in the soil. Now, it's a bit of a problem, and I think it's come about due to the fact that I haven't rotated my soil. Last season, I grew some celery and lettuce, which is in the same family as the carrots. And I've now got nematodes, which means that I need to rest that bed. But not only do I need to probably rest it, I'm probably going to plant it out with some marigolds to try and fumigate it. So that way I can get rid of them. Now, you can still eat them. So that's what I'm doing. I'm preserving them. And as I mentioned, this little recipe is really good as a pickling recipe. You can use it for also just things like green beans or any vegetable really. But I like them with the carrots because I eat them a lot with, barbecue dinners, that sort of thing. The other reason I like it is because, unlike, as I mentioned before, when you grow carrots, you get all different sizes. And quite often you pull out carrots and you end up with these little ones, for example, end up with little carrots like so. And what do you do with them, So other than you can eat them in the garden, which I won't do, I'll throw it out because I'll start chewing on it, and probably not the wisest when you've got a microphone. But the easiest thing is to preserve them. And actually, all I do is I just chop them up, and I like to chop them up into bite size, roughly maybe a centimetre wide or so. Now, you could pre-boil these as well. I don't, because I like them really crunchy. But if they were other vegetables, say like the green beans, I will just give them a blanch before I do them. Now, all I do is I do exactly that. I'll just cut up a few more for the example.
Fab, we've got a couple of comments here on the nematodes piece.
Yep.
Shirley was right on your comment around marigolds. Amanda says throw some mustard in and it'll get rid of your nematodes.
Yeah, mustard seeds as well. So you can grow some mustard to get rid of them. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Just annoying. As I mentioned before, my soil's not great here. It's very sandy. So I've been also adding a lot of soil that I've got from external. Like I go to the local sand and soil centre. And the problem is it's not great. So I don't really know the source. So potentially they could have come in from that as well. So yeah, just annoying. Just another thing to do.
And Fab, we've got Judith just checking in here to confirm that the preserves get stored in the cupboard, not the fridge.
No, they get stored in the cupboard and you can put them in the fridge once they're open. But what you want to do once you open them is actually make sure that they're covered in oil and that none of the actual produce is actually exposed to air, because it will go moldy otherwise. So, yeah. So all I do now is I need to make a brine. So I like to make a really simple brine. Again, don't need to complicate the world. You could read different recipes, but I find the easiest way is just to do a straight 50-50. So I'll grab like 50, I'll grab like half. So I'm looking at, so again, I like to use a apple cider vinegar again, because I just find it's got good cultures in it and it's tasty and I like the flavor. So I just go half vinegar. Then I'll go some filtered water. The other half. I'll add a little bit of salt.
Just whilst you're at that, Fab, we've got a really, I think, helpful comment from Deb, who says mushroom compost is also fantastic to grow in if you don't have good soil to lay on top of your garden beds. Yeah,
definitely. Again, my biggest problem, and I will recommend a lot of people purchasing compost, is to check the pH level if possible. Bear with me while I disappear and out with some sugar.
And we've got a very special guest online here, Fab. I might ask you to say a special shout out to Wendy Simmons from the Royal Botanic Gardens in Sydney, who's joining us live and direct online.
Hey, Wendy, how you going?
Thanks for having us, Wendy. Excellent folks there at the.
So I'm just adding a little bit of sugar to that. Again, add a little bit of sweetness. You don't need it necessarily if you didn't want to. I'm going to add some peppercorns. Could add some mustard seeds, but I don't have any at the moment. And then what I'll do is I'll just bring that to the boil, which I won't do now, but I'll just put that on the stove. I'll bring it to the boil. And then all I do is just simply put all the carrots into a jar.
Fab, question here from Joe, just about what are the ratios of water to sugar there?
Sugar, I just put in about 3 tablespoons. But it depends again on how sweet I want it and how much I'm using. But the main thing is just to get the 50-50 in terms of vinegar and water. You know, you actually don't need as much vinegar, but I find I err on the side of caution anyway. Because I think typically, they say it's something like 5-10% you need to do a brine. But I'm more than happy to have the really vinegar flavored pickles and that sort of stuff. So that's basically all I do then. Again, I just make sure that it is covered. Again, and then I seal it. You could put that in a water bath if you wanted to, but I don't bother. This goes straight in the fridge for me because this will sit there and I'll start eating them. But that's a really another simple preserve that you can do. So,
Bravo.
all right.
Pablo, we've got a question here, actually.
Yep.
Excuse me. From Shirley. Would it be okay to swap out honey for the sugar?
Yeah, definitely. The only thing you'll find is exactly the same. The thing is when you add like sugar or honey, just to beef, sometimes it can ferment a little bit in there. So it will start to get gassy. That's the only thing. But yeah, you can definitely use honey. If you've got a good source of raw honey, particularly, definitely use some honey.
Nice one. And there's just one other question here from her kitchen garden. Reed, did you add salt to that last?
Yes, I did. I add salt to everything. Can't help myself. Yeah, I salt everything. But the salt also, as I mentioned again, salt's another antibacterial. So it's another reason why you put a little bit of salt in there as well as flavor. Okay.
Love it.
All right. So they're two.
Some of the veg that comes out of the garden that possibly is a bit wonky or a bit unusual looking, that's just prime for the pickle, isn't it?
Well, exactly, because there's no complaints there. And that's why I do it, because it's almost impossible to get uniform crops in a small space too, you know, and you want to make the most of what you've put in all this energy and effort. You want to make the most of it. So yeah, the taste doesn't discriminate. It might look great, but it definitely tastes the same. So yeah, definitely worthwhile using your odd bits and pieces. So there are a couple of preserves that I do. As I mentioned before, I've got more recipes in the book itself. And yeah, they're all really simple. I also do a lot of preserved lemons. I make I've been doing a Negroni marmalade of late, which is just basically, because I've got here, I'm fortunate enough, the house that I'm in at the moment, I'm renting, so I can't do a lot to the garden, but I've inherited a few citrus trees, and one of them's a Tangelo, and the kids don't really eat them, so I end up turning them into marmalade, and they make a really nice marmalade. And if you add just a dash of Campari, it just gives it that little bit of a nice sort of finish to it. So I do a lot of that. Other than that, that's sort of what I typically do in terms of preserves. So, yeah.
Amazing. And on that note, Fab, can I just do a bit of a blatant plug? We've got the Grow It Local Awards live at the minute for anyone who's joined us online, and they really are a celebration of the sort of the wonkier and more colourful end of the gardening spectrum, or the sort of unusual stuff that comes out of our patches. So please, everyone, jump online and have a look at that. There's a link there in the chat, just at growitlocal.com/awards. The categories, just off the top of my head, include a search for Australia's wonkiest vegetable, the vegetable that most looks like ... School Garden Awards. We have the Sustainable Gardener Awards, a search for Australia's best chicken name. Fab, last year, the best chicken name that came in was it was a tie. It was tied with Dame Egner and Hen Stefani.
Wow. I like both of those. I used to have chickens in Melbourne. My kids called them Water Pistol and Cooper.
Love it.
You know, I do miss chickens. Chickens are good fun. Chickens, I can't decide whether chickens are really smart or just really stupid. You know, like you can watch them for hours. They're so entertaining. Now, I also want to take the opportunity, because it was Tomato Festival, Paul did say, can you talk a little bit about tomatoes and some of the top tips that you have around growing tomatoes? Because they probably are, I love tomatoes. They're just the quintessential smell of summer to me, both tomatoes and basil. And they're the gateway for most people. Most people start out growing tomatoes. And it was funny, during the week, I got sent a message from a friend, actually an acquaintance. She messaged me over Instagram and sent me a photo of her nephew, who was like, literally, he's 9 years old and he started gardening and he's growing these tomatoes and he's super proud. So I love tomatoes for that reason, is because they are the introduction plant, I think, for most people into gardening. And they're really quite easy to grow. And tomatoes are one of those plants that are most people, most cultures have a connection to the tomato. And it's funny though, tomatoes actually started out in South America and weren't originally used to be edibles. They were actually grown as ornamental plants. And it wasn't until peasants that were actually working and gardeners in the actual aristocrats' gardens, because they used to have botanical gardens, that started to notice that they were edible and started to make them into food. So yeah, you've got a rich history, the old tomato.
So cool. And Fab, on that note, can everyone who's joined us online, have you been growing tomatoes this season? And if so, how was your harvest? Jump in and let us know in the chat. Back to you, Fab.
Yeah, as I was mentioning earlier to you and off there about my tomato season hasn't been that great. As I mentioned earlier, it's been a learning curve coming to one of the things I've loved about moving up here to northern New South Wales is it's a whole new environment, and I've had to learn and adapt a lot of my techniques and skills, which essentially they're the same. It's all about timing, and I haven't quite got my timing quite right up here, and the season's been a bit weird. So actually hasn't been as wet as it normally would be up here. Last year was really wet and sodden. We had all the floods, etc. And this year it's been quite dry. So it's been interesting. But a couple of things that I like to do with tomatoes is to actually grow them myself. And one of the reasons I do that is because I want to try and create a tomato that is actually suited to my back garden. And one of the ways you do that is by saving your own seeds. So that leads me into talking about the different types of tomatoes. Now, typically there's two types of tomatoes. You've got heirloom tomatoes, which essentially are open pollinated tomatoes. And then you've got hybrids, okay? Now, essentially, when you see something that says heirloom or open pollinated, it means that you can save the seeds from that plant, and they will actually produce the following year the exact same genetic makeup, roughly anyway. In most cases, and 99%, you'll get the same characteristics as its parent. With a hybrid, what they do with hybrid tomatoes is they breed two different varieties and they cross them, and that gives them the hybrid tomato. If you save seeds of a hybrid, and many of the tomatoes that you particularly buy in a supermarket are hybrids because they do that, so then that way they can actually own the license to that tomato. But if you try to save those seeds, what happens is, and you plant those seeds, is that it reverts back to one of the parents. So typically when I'm growing tomatoes, I like to grow an heirloom variety, which just means old, which is open pollinated. So and then when you're choosing a tomato as well, there's two different types. You've got determinate and indeterminate. And when you're talking about that, determinate tomatoes refer to as bush tomatoes. So they don't grow large. What happens essentially, as soon as the plant puts out a flower stem, the stem stops growing. So that's why they stay nice and bushy. There's not as many varieties available to you, where in terms of staking tomatoes, so they're the indeterminate type, they'll continue to grow, but they will require staking. So they're the two types available to you. Typically, I like to grow indeterminate ones because of the varieties available, but it just means that you then need to create a growing structure. Couple of my top tips though, is to actually sink the tomatoes when planting them. So what I mean by that, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with it, but is actually to bury them deeper. Now, the idea is then that way when you're planting the tomato is that it puts out roots further up the stem, and also means that you've got roots down deeper. Hopefully, it creates a stronger plant. Some people will actually plant them on an angle. So they'll actually plant them on the side. And then what happens is the plant actually starts to bend towards the light. That's another way to do it. So that's one of the things I'll do. And because tomatoes are really heavy feeders, I like to plant a green manure crop, and often in the season before. So I'll feed lots of organic matter into that garden bed, but a green manure crop, I often mean like legumes. So in Victoria, I would have planted a lot of broad beans in the season prior to planting tomatoes. Up here, broad beans don't tend to work. So I'll plant things like peas, for example, or just beans, because I can actually run beans in the soil here quite late in the season. So that feeds nitrogen back into the soil, and then I'll just dig it through all that green waste material back into the soil to try and build the organic matter, because they're quite heavy feeders. So they require a lot of compost. As well as sinking them, I then typically will prune my tomatoes. So basically what I mean by pruning them is I pinch out all the side growth. Okay, so with indeterminate types of tomatoes, staking varieties, is they'll put out a growth, new stem out in between the main leader and the leaf is a section what they call and refer to as the node, and they'll put out another stem. And I just pinch them out, and I pinch them all out until they get to the first flower. And then once it's got to the first flower, I then leave it. The whole idea is that it's concentrating the energy into actually producing the fruit rather than into the plant itself. Some other tips I typically will do is I use a lot of worm castings, believe it or not, to begin with, but then I don't like to over fertilize my tomatoes, because what happens as well, a plant will only produce fruit if it's stressed. Okay, so what happens often, and one of the things that I get a lot of customers and clients talk to me, go, oh, I had tomatoes, my plants, they're growing massive, they're so big and green and lush, they look awesome, but I got no fruit. And the reason being is quite often what you do is you feed it with too much nitrogen, therefore you end up creating a really bushy plant and it won't produce fruit. So you don't want to overfeed at the same time. One of the other things you can do though to encourage it to obviously produce more fruit is to feed it with some potash and potassium, because that encourages more flowers, and then hopefully you'll get more tomatoes. Now also timing has a lot to do with whether the tomatoes themselves set. So sometimes the way I like to plant my tomatoes as well is to actually batch them. And I like to look at my tomato crop as sort of like a bit like a fund where I diversify. So I put in 2 like plants, for example, this week, and then next week I might put in another 2, and then the week after I put in another 2, and I sort of stagger that over time, hoping that the plants sort of stagger and they come into flower at different times, because when they come into flower, depending upon what's happening at that time, will determine whether pollinators are out, whether they drop or whether they set, all that sort of stuff. So I like to mix it up occasionally. And that's really easy to do as well, particularly with tomatoes, because if I was asked, I know I grow mine from seed, because the whole idea is I'm trying to keep these tomatoes that I've actually collected from Italy, believe it or not, that I'm keeping them. But for most people, you can just go to your tomatoes are probably the best option for most people to buy as seedlings, because when they come into season, that there are so many available that you can go to your local nursery and you can probably plant 2 this week, and then you can go visit again the next week and buy another 2. So that's what I would suggest doing as well. Overall, they're a really simple plant to grow, and yeah, they bring so much joy.
And Fab, we've had absolutely loads of comments here where we're getting reports back from people's experience this season with their tomatoes. Might just share a few quick ones here. Amanda, a bit slower this year. We did plant later because of the rain periods. We're getting about 80% of our normal crop. Wendy, only ones that went well were in pots. The ones on the ground here are no good in Sydney, sadly. Judith, I grow similar tomato varieties due to the limited space, black plum and black cherry. Both did well this summer, although a pesky rat helped themselves to a few. And yeah, we've just got bucket loads of comments here, which is just great. Thanks everyone for sharing. We've got a comment here from Amanda Fab, who says those laterals that you cut off can be grown in new fruit.
They sure can. You can put them, I like to put them in a glass and potentially grow them. So they'll put out another shoot, like treat them as a cutting, or you could actually put them straight into a cutting mix or little pots and regrow them. You could even put them in the ground itself, and sometimes they will take. In some cases, I've seen people actually, what they do is they'll have a lateral growth and they'll bury some of it into the ground, and then later along they'll come and cut it off once the roots are actually formed, and then replant that elsewhere. So you can definitely recreate more plants, and it is very doable.
Love that. And Fab, in terms of your personal preferences when it comes to preserving any excess tomato crop, what do you like to do?
Like I said earlier, I eat a lot of green tomatoes. That's all the other stuff, but I do turn it into what actually ends up, if I've got too much, which is very rare because I eat a lot of tomatoes. My daughter just devours them, and I eat a lot on toast, believe it or not. I love it that time of year. Just some fresh sourdough, some like fresh tomatoes out of the garden with basil and heaps of like olive oil. It's just, my preferred breakfast. But I will make small batches. You can make small batches of tomato sauce, which is really simple and easy to do. All you need to do is blanch them. I just blanch them, take the skin off. You then put them in a little, I just possibly put them in the Thermomix, but you can put them in a food processor, separate them. And then if you wanted to, you can bottle them, and then you can just obviously put them in a warm water bath and slowly preserve them that way. If you wanted to make small batches of sugo, pretty much. But
Amazing.
yeah, very rare though, I have that much. I used to
love
make
that.
a lot of it in Victoria, where we'd have big family days where we'd make tomato sauce for the whole family. But obviously, most of my family's back in Victoria, so we haven't been doing that. And also, I found it hard to find a source for tomato or sourcing tomatoes up here. So if anyone knows anyone, I'd love to find out where I can purchase some, because I just cannot grow that many. That's the problem.
Amazing, love it. And Shelley's popped a comment in here that's getting a bit of interest, that tomato and passion fruit jam is just delicious.
Wow, that would be nice, actually. I'll have to try that. I'll definitely have to try that. I've got plenty of passion fruit at the moment. That's one thing I'm definitely doing really well at the moment, and there's heaps of. So I will try that. So if there is a recipe, share it, please.
Shirley, if you want to pop that in the chat, if you'd be happy to, we'll share that with everyone online. Fab, I've got just a bit of a plug. Tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m, Costa will be live from the Royal Botanic Garden, Sydney, talking tomatoes too. Wendy, I might get you to jump into the chat and just throw that link in there, but it's botanicgardens.org.au for anyone that's interested in hearing to talk tomatoes too.
That would be good. Costa knows more. You know how I know he knows more? His beard. He's got a bigger beard. That's how you judge a gardener. The longer the beard, the more gardening information you know.
So good. Absolutely excellent. Okay. Thank you very much, Wendy. So what does that mean with the moustache? Is that like the grandmaster?
No, I lost a lot of the beards. I'm having this, like I said to you, I'm having to start and learn all again up here. So it's just, I'm back at the beginning,
So good. That's excellent. Love it. Does anyone have any questions for Fab relating to anything we've talked about today? Oh, here's Shirley with the recipe, Fab. So use passion fruit pith for pectin and take it out at ends. Equal quantities tomatoes and passion fruit, and an equivalent AMT amount of sugar. Cook as usual for ham.
All right, done.
I like that. I'll capture that and I'll ping that to you, Fab.
I'll do that because we get way too many passion fruit, believe it or not, here. So
absolutely awesome.
Yeah, so I hope that's preserving my style in a nutshell. The Fab way, I like to call it. Like I mentioned as before, I've got the recipes either in my book, which you can get on my website, or you can go to your local library. They do have it at the local library, all my books actually. And, follow me also on Instagram, on TikTok and YouTube. I've also got a lot of those recipes anyway. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Can you, where can everyone find you? Just your website address again, please.
Okay, so it's just at www.thehungrygardener.com.au.
Love it. I'll just pop that in the chat for everyone. So please do give Fab a follow on Instagram.
I also
TikTok,
do online courses
YouTube
as well. On the website, I run pretty much, you can send me any questions you have. I'll try my best to answer them as well. So I'm online a lot.
Amazing. It's just been such a awesome session, getting lots of love here in the comments, Fab. Such a great session. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and skills. So inspiring. Yep, too many there to mention, but just thanks so much, Fab, for taking time out of your family schedule on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of a heat wave. I think most of most of the countries in at the minute. But yeah, really excellent. For anyone that's interested, the recording of this session will be available on demand from about midday this coming Tuesday. So keep an eye out for that. As mentioned, we've got the Grow It Local Awards running at the minute. To get involved and enter it, simply add a hashtag to any post on Instagram or Facebook. You can find out more on the website. And just lastly, we're just coming to the end of our first pilot run of the Grow It Local Seed Service, where you can grow along with a bunch of our community of like-minded growers, backyard, balcony, community garden, and windowsill farmers across Australia. So yeah, check that out. And I think on that note, Fab, time to get back to the weekend.
Yeah, I'm going to go for a surf. That's what I'm going to do.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Fab, for joining us. It's been such a pleasure. I've learned so much. I know everyone else online has. Thanks again, guys, for joining us. We'll be back next month. We've got a really great session with Jack Semler, who really doesn't need much introduction, but absolute awesome heavyweight gardener. We'll be talking about super bloom and maximum planting in your garden to generate the best harvests and outcomes. So thanks again for joining us. Thank you, Fab, and good afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers, guys.